Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag. With me today is our special guest, Chief Holger Durre.
Hey there.
Looking shiny as always.
Appreciate it.
I just put my hand out where Kathy told me not to put it.
I know.
Yeah, I got in your shot, potentially.
I'm not going to move this entire podcast.
Right?
Only when we're on the other view, okay?
Just going to stay here with my hands folded
Keep
like
your
this.
hands to yourself.
Fantastic.
So, Chief Durre, thanks for being here. We saved the best for last, I guess. This will be our last episode regarding the Legado Fire, and I know people are getting a little tired of repeated Legado Fire stuff, so we'll make this pretty brief. But we'd be remiss if we didn't sit down, you and I, and talk about our response that night, because together we have 15 total units in the system in the Quad City area, and we had 13 of those units on the Legado Fire. And some of our folks, some of our first-in-company officers who are actually very new, including our battalion chief, who was the IC that night, made some great strategic decisions.
No doubt.
So first and foremost, the automatic aid system, that's a system in which it doesn't matter what the truck says, it's close unit response, and we simply automatically respond in to back each other up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's one of the strengths of the system, I think, is not just the fact that we have an automatic aid system, but that the crews operate seamlessly.
Yes.
Because they train together, they work under very similar protocols. And we all know that really good strategic decision-making that night wasn't an accident. You know, that was years and years and years of relationships, years and years of training together, years and years of preparation, coming for the benefit of obviously our residents, but also keeping our firefighters safe in a very complex and quickly evolving scene. And I cannot, I mean, to say that I'm proud is truly a gross understatement.
I agree.
There are amazing decisions, split-second decisions that were made by, like you said, very fresh, newly promoted people into those permanent roles. You know, our first Prescott Captain, Brandon Johnstone, I can't remember, I think we're talking 4 weeks maybe that it was official in terms of him being a captain, and it didn't make any difference. You know, the guy just unbelievably good decision making.
Yes, and placing his ladder where he did to help protect the Homestead Apartments right across the street, kind of a narrow pathway there. But having 4 to 8 weeks in as a company officer and immediately putting that ladder where it goes. And like you said, it's years and years of training. So the fact that he had only been a company officer for 4 to 8 weeks, yet he's been around long enough and trained 100%. Hard enough to know this is what I need to do, right? And we had similar with our first engine company captain. He has been on less than a year as a company officer, but he's been on a lot longer than that, Jim Bushman, and trained a lot longer than that. And so when he heard the call go out and he pulled out of the station, he knew. And when he pulled up, he knew where the hydrants were. He knew where he needed to place his engine right at that moment to get the best strategic advantage over trying to. People look at that fire and they think, oh, you just throw water on it. Well, as they're pulling in, they're thinking, okay, this building is gone. These buildings are still standing. There's people in this complex. How do we strategically place things to protect them? Yeah,
you know, speaking of preparation and having been on before getting promoted, I think there's a key point there. And 2 plugs on Captain Johnstone. He's a paramedic.
Yep.
And I've always seen, you know, really strong strategic and tactical decision making from paramedics outside of EMS, because that's how you're trained to think as a paramedic. And then the other thing is he's deeply involved in our wildland. He's a single resource. He's an engine boss. That helps and has huge implications positively throughout all the other things that they do. So for us, sometimes we get asked, well, why are we so active in wildland? Why do we do off-district assignments? It's because you're building a slide train not just for wildland. It is, you're helping somebody grow in their tactical and strategic decision making. And I'd put our folks up against anybody. There's no doubt about it.
I would too. I mean, if you look at Eric Merrill, who was the IC that night, he had been a battalion chief for like 6 minutes. And yet when he pulled up on that scene, he knew exactly what to do, where to place things, how to communicate with people. And by the time I got there and climbed in the truck with Eric, he had a good plan laid out. And then him and I just supported him throughout that evening. But you know, one of the things that people look at when they see a large fire like that, they think, okay, well, you're just putting fire engines around it and dumping water, but there's actually a lot of strategy that goes
Absolutely.
into it. One of the things Eric and I were doing in the truck, we were looking at the side we could see from Findlay, and we know this thing's going to collapse. The key is, hey, we don't want it to collapse out onto Florentine. How do we keep the collapse inward? How do we move? And so it was strategic placement of hose lines, ladders, all of those things to make sure that wall collapsed the right direction. And that was happening all around that structure,
right.
Because of the way that the incident command had been set up.
Yep. Yeah, and we also had our battalion chief, Jeff Moffett,
Yep.
on the other side, again, working seamlessly. I don't know if Jeff and Eric ever actually made face-to-face contact at all before they deployed. And that's just another testament, right? They were able to do that seamlessly. And then it really just grew from there in terms of even how do we manage the rest of the system? How do we manage statewide mutual aid, which I know we talked about on another episode. All those things coming together is just a testament to, like you said, seemingly maybe not complex fire incident. That's actually a very complex fire incident. And not just because of the size, but because of where the construction type, adjacency to exposed values at risk, all those things. The fact that it was nighttime.
Yes.
There's so many things that went into that I can't commend our folks enough.
Well, and I think it's important to point out too, not only are our folks on the ground working together, but we are working together on a regular basis. Our staffs are working together. And so probably 1:45 in the morning, I'm calling you and you're answering your phone when I call, and you look out the window of your home and you're like, oh crap, we're on our way. And next thing I know, we're surrounded by not only CAFMA command staff, but Prescott command staff, and they're coordinating with bringing additional crews in, just callbacks, right? We're calling people back in to try to staff engines. You had Chief Lucas go directly to PRCC to work with our awesome Prescott Regional Communications people that did amazing things that night. Don't want to go without giving them their due credit. But to see all the staff to come together 2:30 in the morning at that point and just get the job done.
Yeah.
Here's how we work together. And then we continued for an entire week on this incident, communicating between the two agencies and coordinating to make sure that we had coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. It just shows the strength, the depth of the relationship, the system itself. I think if you look at 15 stations, like you mentioned, and the size of our organizations, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that large of an agency. But the fact that we were able to force multiply the way that we did, and also build endurance into it by rotating people in and out in various positions, I think that's just another benefit to having it built the way that it is. And couldn't think that we could do it any other way. Actually, it's almost like this is a no-brainer.
Right.
But when you leave this area, it is not as commonplace as we're just used to it.
And I came from Missouri, and this is exactly what we would do there. And then I think you did very similar in Colorado. But there's other parts of the United States where you don't see that type of working relationship. And I think this also points out the importance, because you and I as fire chiefs are involved in a lot of things, right? It's not just our home agency, but we do things across the state. And I think my involvement over 9 years in the statewide mutual aid committee paid dividends in knowing exactly who I needed to call, how the system worked. If this doesn't work, then we do this type of thing. And it also allowed Chief Merrill to focus on the incident itself, while I made other phone calls to get things accomplished for him and in support of him and the incident overall.
Yeah, the only feedback is if you can get Chief Merrill maybe to talk a little bit more. It seemed like he was really subdued. Maybe get him to be less shy.
Was he sleeping?
I don't know.
Because if he's not sleeping, his mouth's moving.
That's a good point. Just kidding.
Jody knows.
Yes, that's a very good point.
He uses words.
Yes, he does.
But he did, the one thing I'll say though is that when you listen to his command presence that night and you listen to the radio traffic, it was calm, cool, and collected by everyone on the scene. They were just going to work. Yeah. It was just, okay, we have an incident and we're going to go down our incident command sheets and we're going to get everything together. We're going to protect the values at risk. We're going to protect our people from injury. One of the things that happened that night, it was closer to morning. A subcontractor came up to me, because we don't want to forget there were 200 jobs lost like that. Yep. I mean, just immediately 200 jobs lost. And a subcontractor came up the incident command vehicle, and I talked to him, and he said, I hope nobody came up from the valley and was in the building. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, sometimes the contractors or some of the employees that live in the valley come up Sunday night and they'll stay there. And I just looked through the windshield at the building and thought, oh no. And that then triggered a whole other side of the incident where we got a hold of Brad and Ron Fain, and we said, listen, this is what we were just told. Now we need you to contact the contractor, have them contact all the subcontractors, and do an accountability of every single employee for every contractor or subcontractor that's supposed to be on this job site. And so just another thing off to the side that came into play that night. So it's not, you look at a big building, you're like, oh, it's surrounded and drowned. There's a lot more to it than that. And our folks performed to the training that they've had. They defaulted to that training, and that training was solid. And with everyone else coming in between law enforcement, the town of Prescott Valley, the evacuation, talking with emergency management and getting their assistance on some evacuation things. The water department with Prescott Valley, I mean, Neil and his team, to make sure we never lost water pressure on a fire that large and a community this size, that's pretty impressive work.
That's really impressive. And you mentioned that our fleet services supervisor reached out in the middle of the night, found out about it, and knew that your platform, Aerial, was in your shop. You would think, right, how does that affect the City of Prescott Fleet Manager? Well, it's because him and Dominic are always talking. And they're coordinating, and he knew about it, and he also immediately said, what can we do? And within a very short amount of time, we had City of Prescott Fleet on scene with your fleet, coordinating and managing the support around that incident. That's pretty unusual, folks. I think there's a lot of folks that think that, well, that's just the way Prescott does business. And yeah, it is. But that is not the norm around the country.
It is not. And to see the different divisions coming together within the fire departments, our warehouse, planning and logistics, they're fantastic getting out there, making sure that our folks were taken care of with water, with Gatorade to keep them hydrated, with food, because, hey, this is going to be an all-day event. We're going to need some food. And so Josh came out first thing in the morning, as soon as McDonald's opened. He's getting English muffins and whatever he can to bring over, and people are bringing donuts because law enforcement was there. So I just figured I'd slip that in. I know that makes Kathy smile.
Everybody loves donuts.
Do you get your husband donuts on a regular basis?
No.
You should.
Wow.
I hear Bosa's is good, according to Chief Bonnie.
No, but I like the McDonald's, and just a special shout out to Josh, because I turned around at one point and he just shoved one in my mouth. And it was fantastic.
He was great. And Chief Tyser getting his coffee. And it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we've been there since 1:30, 1:45, and Eric and I were pretty tired sitting in the front seat of that truck. But it was good. And I talked to my dad, because we did things slightly different in Missouri, where once the fire chief got on the scene, the fire chief would generally take command, or an assistant chief would take command from battalion chief. Out here, our battalion chiefs are trained to run these incidents. And so
very well.
When I got in the truck, all I did was ask Eric, what can I do to support you?
Exactly.
And he said, please take this radio, you talk to dispatch. And then we just started discussing his plan for operations. And then as the event unfolded, we would discuss, well, what do you think of this? What if we move this engine here? And then they got the drone up. It was a little bit of everything coming together. But mainly, it goes back to training and the cooperation we have. And I think it's important to point out, too, because the Quad City area is growing. And there are some people that are concerned about the growth. And I don't know if you hear it in Prescott, but I hear it out here, where folks in the community will tell developers and elected officials, well, the fire department can't handle it. That was 685,000 square foot structure that was completely involved. And we handled it. And we handled it because we have quality training. We have resources. Do we need more? Absolutely, and we're working on that. but the cooperation between our agencies is what makes these things possible. This is how we handle large-scale incidents. And then we have the automatic aid system, the county-wide aid system, and the statewide aid system. And I pointed out to someone else that just the next week, Prescott had a conflagration in a master plan community where multiple homes under construction were on fire at the same time. Yep, Phoenix. What'd I say?
You said Prescott.
Okay, Phoenix. It starts with a P.
I mean, no knock on Mike Duran, but we.
Right. No, we like Mike. But when you had that fire in Phoenix, you had, I think it was 7 other cities, could have been more, that came in and assisted. And that was City of Phoenix.
Correct.
And the reason is because that's the most appropriate type of response. And it's to be expected that you're going to need aid. And fortunately, we needed aid. We got the aid. It's not to say, again, that we don't need more resources. We know we do. And we know the aid takes a while to get here. Right. So we have to be able to protect our community in that time. But I think we showed people what we are actually capable of. So my message to folks is, to elected officials or to developers, if somebody tells you the fire department can't handle something in CAFMA's jurisdiction, if you haven't heard from me, then reach out to me. Because if we have an issue, we will tell you directly. And if we don't, then it's just noise in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Holger, thanks for coming in. I know Kathy gave us a timeline. She said 15 minutes. We're over 15.
Yeah, but so close.
Oh, but we're good.
Good job.
We're so close.
Oh, look at that.
Definitely want to have you back on again.
Yes.
We have a lot more stuff to talk about as we move into the second half of the year. I can't believe it's going that fast, but amazing things happening between the city of Prescott and Central Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. And a lot of it is because you're now here and the relationship that we have is amazing. And next time we'll talk about accreditation and give a shout out to our accreditation teams that are doing such great work.
Absolutely.
So, Kathy, anything I need to remind anyone of? Or are we good?
Not off the top of my head, but just very thankful for Prescott Fire Department.
Well, likewise.
Seriously.
Absolutely. And to everyone that took part that night, from the community to the town of Prescott Valley, to the police, to Yavapai County Sheriff's Office, to Prescott, the city of Prescott, Prescott Regional Communications Center, Emergency Management, ATF, Lifeline, Priority Ambulance, everybody coming together to work as one for the betterment of the community, the safety of the community. It's an amazing outpouring. So, Chief, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. Kathy, we'll end it here. Until next week, try not to get in trouble.